Welcome to Crime Alley Documentaries, where we delve into the darkest corners of true crime. I'm your host, and today we unravel the harrowing tale of Morgan Metzer, a woman whose life was shattered by a meticulously orchestrated attack. It was New Year's Day 2021, and Morgan had decided to make it an early evening. She'd had plans with her best friend and business partner Nicole, which they had both been looking forward to. After all, being a mom is hard, let alone being a mom to twins. She was absolutely exhausted. So Nicole didn't protest much when she got up to leave after only a few drinks. She did give her some crap like old best friends do, but she understood. It had been an absolute roller coaster ride for Morgan for months now, and she just needed some peace to refuel. Her twins were in Florida with their aunt for a couple of days, and Morgan planned on just taking it easy and going to bed early. She thought about the years she'd had while the fireworks were going off. She couldn't help but feel lucky, blissful, blessed even. Some may think it was a little harsh that she felt blessed after getting divorced. But Morgan was honest with herself. She knew this was better for her kids. She had met Rod when she was 14 and he was 17. It was love at first sight. It was actually scary how fast they had fallen for each other and how much they were in love. But the heart wants what it wants, and the couple tied the knot when Morgan was just 21. Things were really good for the couple. They were going as strong as ever. But grief found its way in. Kevin, Rod's younger brother who had wished the couple endless years of love, health and happiness, lost his battle with leukemia at the age of 19. It destroyed Rod, and Morgan understood. They were so close. It was normal for him to lean on her more than ever. The next year brought some good news. Morgan was pregnant. They were about to have a son. It was an easy decision choosing a name. His name was of course gonna be Kevin. What else would you expect from a loving wife who was there for her husband the whole time and held him through all the nights he couldn't sleep? Baby Kevin was born early with a congenital heart defect. Sadly, this wouldn't be a happy ending for the couple. Kevin only lived 18 days and died on his due date. It was soul-shattering. Morgan couldn't even remember the months after. It was all a huge blur, and she didn't care to remember all the pain and suffering. But Morgan had faith. If anything, she was absolutely resilient and knew God had a plan. So, just 3 months later, Morgan was pregnant again. And this time it was twins. They were over the moon. Things were finally looking up, and the couple couldn't believe how lucky they were. Morgan gave birth to 2 healthy babies, a boy and a girl, in 2012. It was like things were finally becoming better. They had caught a break after all the pain they had gone through as newlyweds. But you know how it is. Having babies is never easy, and it comes with its own set of problems. They both knew that the babies were nothing but miraculous blessings. But somehow the marriage and their relationship had changed. But this was not the only reason things had gone south. Things were tight around the Metzer house. Rod was not bringing in as much as he used to, and he was always on edge because of it. So Morgan, being the loving and supportive wife that she was thinking how she could help her husband and make a better life for her kids. So she finally started up her own business as an interior designer, and what do you know, things just took off. I mean, her career was flourishing. She was bringing in way more than Rod, and her company was getting bigger and bigger. Meanwhile, Rod was losing every job and any money he had. You know what this means. Things were not good at the Metzer house. This time, marriage-wise. So, after a while, it just made sense for the couple to go their separate ways. Morgan crawled into bed, thinking of her kids. Baby Kevin, Rod, the life she had left behind and the life she had built. She couldn't deny it. She was happy. peaceful. It was a little after midnight when she opened her eyes for a quick second and caught a glimpse of something. She had this feeling of being watched, and she had woken up. But she was alone in a big house and it was after midnight, so she thought she was just seeing things. She blinked and looked again. Was this real? There was a masked figure in her bedroom doorway. His fists were clenched, and he was standing there like a soldier. Before she could even realize if this thing was real or not, he ran towards her and got on top. He didn't waste any time. He started pistol whipping Morgan. He put her hands behind her and slipped some zip ties on and tightened them. She couldn't move. 1,000 thoughts rushed to her head. What about her kids? Was she going to see them ever again? Was this it? But she hadn't done a will. She hadn't made any kind of arrangement about their living situation and who was going to get them. He strangled her nearly unconscious twice and sexually assaulted her. He told her, quote, "You're going to miss your husband." And Morgan, without even thinking, replied, quote, "No, don't hurt my husband. I love him." For a split second, she thought of Rod, her ex-husband, the man who she once considered the love of her life, the father of her 2 beautiful children. Recently, he'd been diagnosed with cancer, just like his brother. He refused to tell anyone about his sickness. One day, he'd broken the news to her and she couldn't just do nothing about it. After all, they'd been through so much together. Not all good, but they genuinely loved each other and she really wanted to support him. She was used to it by this point. She had even let him stay at the house with them because he didn't want to be alone. He'd been sleeping on the sofa. The intruder then started asking her where her jewelry was while he went through her stuff and drawers. Then he took her phone and demanded her passcode. Morgan had been sexually abused and beaten up. She was terrified. She thought this was gonna be the end for her. She had no idea why he was on her phone, not before she heard a door lock open. It was her back porch. He placed a pillowcase on her head, picked her up from the bed, and took her to the back porch with her hands still zip-tied behind her back. She couldn't see anything and was absolutely scared to death. She didn't know what was going to happen to her. But then he said, quote, "Do not get up until you hear 2 car honks or I'll kill you," end quote. And Morgan could hear him walk away. But her house was in a secluded area and there was very little chance that a neighbor could have seen her sitting there. She didn't dare to move, thinking he would be watching and would be back for her if she did anything he didn't like. It was maybe 20 minutes later and she heard some footsteps walking back to her porch. She couldn't see and was thinking, "Oh my God, he's come back to finish the job." But then she heard a very familiar voice saying, "Oh honey, what happened?" It was Rod. Oh, thank God she was safe. She was gonna live. She was gonna see her kids. Rod, panicking, immediately called 911. Morgan didn't want to be alone. She begged him not to leave the room while still zip-tied. They called her father and brother and they showed up at the house too. 2 police officers arrived shortly and started talking to Rod and Morgan about the events that had taken place. But the officers had a lot of questions, saying that Morgan was beaten so harshly. Her eye was swollen shut, black and blue. One particular question that they both had in mind was, exactly why was Rod there in the middle of the night if they were divorced and not living together? He said he was brushing his teeth, getting ready for bed, when he heard knocking on his window and there was a voice. He couldn't quite make it out, but the only word he'd managed to understand was Morgan. He tried calling her, but she hadn't answered. So, taking this as a bad sign and thinking that something bad had happened or was about to happen to Morgan, he'd driven 12 minutes to her house to check on her. Rod, just like Morgan, thought their 20-year relationship meant something and they were always gonna look out for each other. And they always had. He used to call her princess, and he treated her like one. Well, before all the heartbreak and ups and downs and the divorce. There wasn't a thing she would mention to him that she wouldn't get. It was like he was there to serve her in any way possible. Thinking back, her heart broke a little. What had become of them? And tonight? If he hadn't been there, God knows what would have happened. Maybe her attacker was still there. Maybe he was still watching her. The officers, wanting to get a recount of everything, separated the 4 people present at the house: Morgan, Rod, Morgan's father, and her brother. When they got out of earshot, Morgan whispered to one of the officers that she thought it was Rod who had attacked her. You think the officers would be like, the guy who just saved you? The person who just swooped in like a hero and protected you? That guy? Are you insane? But nope. The officers were exactly on the same page as Morgan. From the moment they'd seen Morgan, they just knew this was an emotional attack, filled with anger and maybe even hatred. And as for Rod, he was behaving extremely weird. They just knew that they had to place this guy under arrest then and there and not give him the chance to clean up and get rid of evidence. If he was really the assailant, he had left Morgan alone for maybe 40 minutes before coming back to the scene, which to Morgan was 20 minutes max, adrenaline and all. So this meant that he probably wouldn't have had enough time to discard everything. The police needed him in custody. So they asked for his phone because he'd claimed he had called Morgan plenty of times that night, but she hadn't picked up. His phone was an iPhone and there was a hidden folder. In this hidden folder, the officer found pictures of Morgan. But the thing was, she was either partially dressed or nude. And it looked like she wasn't aware that these pictures were being taken. There were also pictures of Morgan's cell phone showing text messages between her and another man. And so, they cuff him. So, was Rod really the intruder, or was this whole thing a huge mistake? Well, what was the motive? Maybe getting Morgan back. After all, he'd been begging Morgan to take him back for months, even begging her while he was staying at the house with her and sleeping on her sofa. When she turned him down, he spent all day texting her saying that he promised he would make enough money and she should quit her job and give him another chance. To get away from him, she had even lied to him, saying that she was gonna spend the night at her parents' and turn her phone off. She just needed some space from him. The police got to work. Morgan's property had security cameras. This was the place to start. But all their hopes faded when they realized that all the video from the time of the attack had been erased through the app on Morgan's phone, which the attacker had used to unlock the back porch. Her phone was never found. But if there was a security system, how did he get in? It turns out that this guy removed the alarm sensor from the window and put it on the windowsill. So if someone was to open the window, the alarm system wouldn't pick it up because the sensor was still making contact. In other words, he had disabled the sensor while staying at Morgan's. Though the camera did pick up some footage of Rod earlier that day on the front porch. He was supposedly leaving Morgan a check and he sent a picture of the check to Morgan with a message saying basically that you should have all the money because you deserve everything. But get this, the check would have bounced because Rod was practically broke. This was just a grand gesture. But the main reason behind leaving the check and sending her the message was that Morgan had told him that she was gonna spend the night at her parents', right? And this was his trick to get her to come home and pick up the check. And surprise, surprise, the intruder had taken the check. It was never recovered. Based on all of this, the investigators secured a search warrant on Rod's car and apartment. And as soon as they walked into his place, they found a bag of zip ties, plus a portion of a zip tie. So they head to the crime lab and guess what? The remaining portion found at his house, well, It matched the zip ties found on Morgan's wrists. They also found some stuff that I personally find extremely disturbing, like this book called 7 Ways to Be Her Hero, and also his browser history. He searched stuff like how to change your voice, how to choke somebody unconscious, how to crack an iPhone password, how to get sympathy from your ex. And he had also searched, drumrolls please, cancer diagnosis letters. This guy had faked an email account and had created a cancer diagnosis letter to show Morgan. He had created a bill for a doctor's office to prove that he was being treated for cancer, all this to convince Morgan to take him back. When the police interviewed Rod and slammed him in the face with all they had found on him, he simply said, quote, "There's something funny going on here," end quote, meaning that someone was framing him, and he had no zip ties at his apartment. Little did he know that the police had already got their hands on videos of him purchasing the zip ties. And this I actually find a little funny, but when he was purchasing the zip ties, it was during COVID, and everyone was naturally wearing masks. Well, except this guy. They had this guy's full face on camera and he was still denying it. I mean, can you imagine? You're doing something criminal and you have every excuse to cover your face, and you don't? Why not? He even denied that he had ever said he had cancer. He only said he had diabetes, and that was all. You can make this stuff up. And the police, even though they had more than enough incriminating evidence, checked the security cameras of his apartment building. There was no video of Rod leaving his apartment when he said he did. Remember the knock on the window that made him leave to check on his ex-wife? Well, no surprise there, that never happened. But there was footage of him rushing back to his apartment after Morgan was attacked and leaving again just 4 minutes later at 1:24 a.m. in a completely different outfit. He was also seen in the footage carrying a bag which was never found. But obviously, the police believed that there was evidence in the bag and Rod had got rid of it somewhere between his apartment and Morgan's place. Within hours of being interviewed, Rod was charged with 10 counts, including home invasion, kidnapping, aggravated assault, and sexual battery. And on August 4, 2021, Rod pleaded guilty to a total of 14 counts. He agreed to serve 25 years on a 70-year sentence, which means that he gets 25 years of imprisonment and then he gets 40 years of probation. Morgan's victim impact statement was impressive. I mean, she didn't even shed a tear. Imagine the strength of this woman. Here, I will only read a portion of it. Rod, not only will this statement be to my attacker, but it also be my last words to whom I thought was the love of my life. The last 4 years being married to you was like living with a monster that constantly tried to break me down and fence me in. It was a blessing in disguise. I can now walk with the confidence knowing the pain you have given me is turned into power. You may ask, how did Rod change so drastically? How did a loving boyfriend and husband turn into such a monster? Well, what I've told you so far is just the tip of the iceberg. During their marriage, specifically after Morgan's business took off, Rod became physically and mentally abusive. One Labor Day, Morgan and Rod were celebrating on a boat with some friends, and when they returned back to their cabin, well, that was the first time ever that an argument had turned physical. But Rod went out of his way to convince everyone, including Morgan's parents, that she was to blame for the injuries. He told everyone that Morgan was so out of control that she was wailing all over and Rod had to restrain her so she wouldn't hurt him or herself. But that never happened. He actually had started beating her. This caused Morgan's friends to stop talking to her, but this wasn't the only blow. Little by little, Rod started making her doubt her own reality. He started leading her to believe that she was the one who started every single fight, and it was because of her not being able to manage her temper that their marriage was failing. He eventually worked his way up to faking being beaten up or pushed by Morgan. During one specific argument, he rolled down the stairs and told the kids, quote, "Look, mommy pushed me downstairs. Can you believe that?" End quote. I mean, including your own kids in your screwed up deception, that's a whole new level to me. This whole playing with her mind even included sexual abuse. But at that point, Morgan was so far gone believing that she was losing her mind, not remembering stuff, and being at fault in every single argument that she didn't even recognize that she was being sexually abused. So please, pay attention. These signs are very, very subtle, and most of the time you can see them because you're standing too close, and you fail to realize that you actually aren't doing anything wrong. You're being gaslit, and by someone you love no less. But listen to the people around you, the ones who try to tell you that your reality is what he is making it out to be, and it is nowhere near the reality you are actually living. Be safe, be vigilant, and please ask for help. Until next time, this is your host signing off. Please leave any theories or comments you might have for us down below. We're really interested to know what you think about this case.